This is You're Probably Right. Entertainment first, everything else is just bonus. Opinions, all ours. Sometimes backed by research, but never the final word. There are always exceptions, so take it with a grain of salt and a slight dusting of chili powder. If something in this episode resonates with you or you want to reach out directly, you can email the show at yprpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find the podcast on Facebook. Just search You're Probably Right podcast and the page should come up. And if you are listening somewhere other than Spotify, you can find the show there as well. Just search You're Probably Right and follow the podcast so new episodes show up automatically. All right, let's get into it.
How you doing? This is MCM and you're listening to You're Probably Right. This is episode 314. Did I miss my window? What we start valuing when we think time is running out. You know, there comes a point in an adult's life where the questions you ask yourself quietly start changing. I mean, when you're young, it's simple. Who do I like? Who's exciting? Who gives me butterflies? Who looks good? Who makes me laugh? Who's really, really fun? Who's boring? Then a few years pass and it becomes something else. It becomes who likes me, who chooses me, who wants to build something with me. But eventually, especially somewhere between, I would say, 30 and 35, a different question creeps up. It's more like, did I miss my window? Not aloud, obviously. Not dramatically and probably not on Instagram or whatever. Internally. You're brushing your teeth, you're driving alone, you're at a wedding or a shower of some sort. Maybe you're scrolling through past, engagement photos or whatever. You're watching your kids get older if you have them. And you start doing the math in your head, trying to figure out if you have more behind you or in front of you. Sometimes you're not really trying to figure that out. Not the number. Life math. In other words, how many years do I realistically have left to build something stable and memorable? How much energy do I have left to start over? How many more breakups can I take or absorb? How much disruption can my kids handle? And how much financial reset can I survive? And that's when something changes inside the way you evaluate people. Not because you're desperate necessarily, although you might feel it from time to time, but because you're aware. Time feels different at 35 than it did at 25. Time feels different at 45 than it did at 35. And obviously, time feels different at 55 than it did at 45. It's not really about panic. It's about compression. When you're young, it feels like there's room to experiment. You date someone for a year and it doesn't work out, fine. You move cities, fine. You start over, fine. Later in life, fine carries a cost. Moving means, kids change schools, move away from other family, if possible. Breaking up means dividing assets, going to lawyers, possibly court cases. Starting over means explaining your story again, each time, again and again. And so when you start feeling like time is limited, even slightly, your standards don't disappear, but they rearrange. You begin to weigh things differently. You stop looking only at chemistry, you start looking at structure, job stability, debt load, ex partner drama, custody schedules, emotional regulation, health, family background, conflict styles. You're no longer just dating a person, you are dating their system. And this is not shallow, it's just very adult. But here's where it gets actually complicated if it isn't already. When you believe you are running out of time, the mind does not just become practical, it becomes protective.
If this sounds familiar, follow the show so this kind of thinking stays close.
And protective thinking changes how we choose. When you believe you have time, you can afford to walk away at the first serious red flag. When you believe you're late, you start negotiating with those flags, hoping that maybe some are a little bit pink. You start saying things like, well, nobody's perfect. He's not really that good looking, but he's better than that other guy. Or, he's not really as good looking as that guy, but he makes more money. Or, he makes less money. He's not as good looking, but at least he won't cheat on me. Yeah. It's not that bad. At least this person is consistent. At least she's not cheating. At least she's stable. At least is a dangerous phrase because at least usually means something is missing. You're giving something up. And that missing piece is often the thing that will matter most in 10 years. He's dirty. Well, he's a guy. Yeah, in 10 years, you might feel different. Now, let's take it deeper. There are two patterns that show up strongly in midlife relationships. One is rushing, the other is staying. And sometimes the same person does both. They rush into something because it feels safe or timely, and then they stay in it because leaving feels heavier than entering it ever was. Let's start with rushing. Human beings have a natural tendency to move relationships forward. Most people are more inclined to continue than to cut it off. We like momentum. We like the feeling of something building. When someone likes us or likes us back, Especially after rejection or loneliness, it feels validating. It feels like air in your lungs. And validation and air reduces anxiety. That's why they tell you to breathe deep when you're having anxiety. Now, put that with midlife realities. You know, if you're a woman in your mid 30s or 40s and you still want children, right? Fertility becomes a real variable, not imaginary, but real. We're not going to start talking about wrinkles. If you are a woman who has already had children and you are thinking about stability just for them at least, not even thinking about yourself, partner choice becomes about structure, not just attraction and satisfaction. If you're a man coming out of a divorce in your 40s, you might feel the loss of daily routine or daily money more than you expected. The house is quiet, the structure is gone, the shared responsibilities are gone, and rebuilding that can feel so urgent. And then there's, what is that thing? Online dating. Yeah. Let's talk about that, honestly. Apps change the entire environment. For some women, dating apps come with harassment, exhaustion, safety issues. So when someone appears stable and respectable, right, it feels rare, and rare feels valuable, and valuable things feel like they should be secured quickly and progressed with. For some men, apps can mean low match rates, constant rejection, comparison against endless competition. So when someone responds warmly, it feels like, whew, opportunity. You don't see what's behind the curtain and why they're still available. Opportunity feels like something you lock down. Add fatigue to that. People in midlife are often tired. They have careers, kids, health stress, aging parents. They're not trying to casually date 10 people. So when something feels promising, they kind of accelerate it, almost like a fast burning litmus test or something. Exclusivity happens fast. Overnight happens fast. Keys get exchanged a lot faster. Cohabitation happens fast. Blended routines happen fast. And once routines merge, disentangling feels complicated. Now, here's something important. Rushing is not always reckless. Some couples move quickly and it works. Why am I whistling? The problem is when speed replaces testing, compatibility is not measured when everything is smooth. Compatibility is measured under pressure. What happens is when you lose a job. What happens when one of you loses a job? Things get a little bit strange, right? What happens when money gets tight? What happens when parenting styles clash? What happens if someone gets pregnant? Where's all the money coming from? Because she had a better job, or at least the one that pays more. What happens when one of you shuts down during a conflict? If those stress tests have not happened, right? You don't really know what you're building on. And those aren't really things that you can ask over a cup of tea, really. You are building on feeling, and feeling is powerful, but feeling is not structure. Feeling's more like a wave. Now let's move to staying, because staying is where most adults actually live. You can know something is not fully right and still remain. Why, you say? Because commitment is not just about happiness, it's about investment. It's time invested, it's money invested, it's children invested, it's family invested, shared friends, shared memories, shared trauma, shared growth, shared history. And it seems like every time you do that, it feels like you're like splitting atoms. It's like you were this one hole and then you got into this one and then you got another and you're divided again. The longer you are in something, right, the harder it is to step back and evaluate it objectively. That's why a lot of time you'll see your friends in weird relationships and you're like, why are you with this person? You tell me all of this stuff, but you're still in that relationship. It doesn't make any sense. And the thing is, most of the time when you're in it, you just can't see it. And a lot of the time, if you really want, if you don't want to be alone, you want to be with this person, you look past a lot of things. And a lot of it has to do with the amount of time you put in. There is also something else happening. The more you invest, the more you want that investment to make sense. See, I'm not crazy. See, he's a good guy. So you justify, right? You reinterpret things. You focus on the good days. You minimize the bad patterns. You compare your relationship to worse examples to feel better about what you're doing now. Or you take other people's and you look at theirs and say, at least I'm not them. Or at least I'm not her. At least I'm not him. And over time, dissatisfaction becomes background noise. Yeah, dissatisfaction. Imagine that, huh? Like, well, it wasn't that bad. Could have been worse. I've had worse. Add children to that, yours or theirs. Now the equation changes completely. Leaving is not just about you. It's about custody schedules and school stuff and emotional impact and financial redistribution, residuals, housing, legal costs. In many cases, especially for women, the financial consequences of separation are heavier sometimes. That reality shapes tolerance. Staying can be tragic, or it might be strategic as well. But here is the danger. If you remain somewhere long term and silence your deeper needs, resentment builds quietly. It doesn't explode immediately, it just keeps on accumulating in tone, in distance, in reduced affection, in sarcasm, in emotional withdrawal, in contempt. And once contempt enters a relationship, it corrodes everything. I guess depending on how venomous the participants are, it might erode quicker than others. Now, here's where I want to bring you back. If you're listening and you feel like time is short, the question is not whether you are late. The question is how that belief is influencing your standards. Are you evaluating clearly, or are you negotiating with fear? Are you choosing someone because they truly fit your life or structure and your emotional needs? Or are you choosing someone because they remove the discomfort of being alone? You see, there's a difference. And that difference does not show up immediately. Maybe you just have needs that you need met by somebody who won't drive you crazy. It shows up 5 years later, though. It won't show up immediately, usually, because you're not looking at everything properly. 10 years? Yeah. When you realize you built something stable but hollow, or you built something steady but misaligned with who you actually are, we're not done. So you rushed. Or maybe you didn't rush. Maybe it felt measured. Maybe it felt reasonable. Maybe it felt like you were being mature. And now you're in it. Months turn into years. Your lives are braided together. And something inside you knows it's not fully right. It's not toxic. They're not abusive. Not catastrophic. Just not fully right. But you stay. Why? Because leaving is heavier than entering ever was. Let's talk about honesty. When you're 35, 45, 55, you're not just leaving a person, you are dismantling a whole infrastructure of a relationship. You're separating finances that have been blended. You're splitting retirement accounts sometimes. You are renegotiating housing. You're explaining to children. You're dividing holiday days. You're potentially cutting your income in half or worse. You're moving. You're restarting routines. You're losing shared friends. You're resetting identity. You're changing your name even, possibly. That's not just emotional. That's logistical. And logistics scare adults more than feelings do. People can handle heartbreak. What they're afraid of is instability. What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to us? What's going to happen to them? That is why someone can say, I'm not happy, and still I say, I cannot blow this up. Also, finding someone who understands everything I just said, it's not easy either. That tension is common in midlife. You're not blind, you're just calculating. Sometimes your calculations are off. And here's where it gets kind of subtle. The longer you stay, the more staying feels justified. Because if you've already invested 5 years, leaving in year 6 feels like admitting something. If you invested 10 years, leaving at year 11 feels like failure. There is something in the human mind that wants prior effort to mean something. Everything you did has to add up to something positive. There must be some forward motion. It's like playing a sport like football. You don't want to get all the way up or all the way down, however you look at it, to the 5-yard line just to fumble on the first yard, just before the goal. So you start thinking, we have to build too much to quit, or we have built too much to quit. We've come too far. It would be a waste. And the more you repeat that narrative, the more staying becomes the default, even if your satisfaction is very low. You can be loyal and dissatisfied at the same time. Now, layer that with kids. Children complicate everything. You might be thinking, I can tolerate this. I just do not want my kids to deal with divorce. I don't want them bouncing between houses. I don't want financial stability to hit them. I'm concerned about who my ex will pick up. I don't want a fracture world for them. That instinct is protective, but it can also keep you in something that slowly drains you. Now, again, I'm not talking about marriage in that aspect, because I'm not advising anybody who is actually tied to knot and married and not being abused or cheated on regularly to depart anything. Remember, these episodes are for entertainment purposes only, guys. I gotta say it. Yeah, I believe marriage is supposed to be for life. Whether that happened for me or not, that's a whole nother story, but I believe that you need to stay in your marriage. You can read about it in the Bible if you don't believe me. But anyways, you're protecting the whole situation. And even though it's slowly just draining you, maybe you've just been in a relationship and you have kids or something, you're not married. And the thing is that drained parents in that situation, for instance, they're not neutral. They're under pressure, and children feel that pressure. They feel the distance, they feel the contempt back and forth. They feel the silence, they feel absence of warmth. So staying isn't, well, it's not always a so-called noble choice in a sense. It just depends, right? Both have costs. And that's why this is hard. Now let's talk about attachment, because this part matters more than most people admit. You get used to someone, their smell, their routines, their presence in the kitchen, their voice everywhere, their body in bed. The brain forms pattern around that, what you're familiar with. It doesn't even have to look so great. Like the person maybe used to look amazing 13 years ago, but now not so much, but you're used to them. So it doesn't even bother you if they've been told they're so-called not so good looking these days. If you know what I mean. Familiarity lowers anxiety. You know what you got. You know what you're going to get, Even if the relationship is not deeply fulfilling, familiarity feels stabilizing. So when you imagine leaving, you do not just imagine freedom, you imagine disruption, silence, an empty house, uncertain weekends, explaining your story again to someone new. That anticipation alone can be enough to keep someone where they are. Not because they're thrilled, because, they're anchored. Anchored is predictability, and predictability feels safer than possibility. Now let's take it to a whole nother area that we rarely talk about or articulate. Midlife dating is exhausting, they say. Explaining your history repeatedly, of course that's exhausting. Everybody says. You're just telling your story over and over till you can't even remember who you told what. That means you're dating too much. You're reopening wounds. And reopening wounds is exhausting and painful. Learning someone new from scratch is exhausting. Not to mention, you have the memories of all the other people or the other person. So, staying can sometimes be less about love and more about fatigue. You might say, I don't know if this is perfect, but I do not have the energy to rebuild again. And energy matters, especially when you have kids, especially when you have aging parents, especially when you have a career that already drains you. So now we have urgency on one side and exhaustion on the other. And in between those two forces, people, they make decisions. Now, here is something even more uncomfortable. Sometimes people stay because the alternative feels worse, not because what they have is great, but because what they imagine leaving could bring feels like, it could be riskier, could be a problem 7 years down the line. Maybe there's a risk of poverty. Maybe there's a risk of loneliness, risk of regret, risk of dating someone worse or nutso, risk of losing time, risk of embarrassment. I knew it wasn't going to work with them. I told her. They told me. Risk of social judgment, risk of making a mistake, risk keeps people planted. But here's a consequence, though. If you stay somewhere long enough while suppressing your deeper needs, those needs do not disappear. They just mutate. They show up as irritation, sarcasm, as checking out, as fantasizing about, some sort of escape, as emotional numbness. And numbness is dangerous because numbness convinces you that you are fine when you are actually just disconnected. So you're not feeling anything. Now let's get back to the original question. Did I miss my window? If you believe you did, you will tolerate more than you should. You will rush when you should test. You will stay when you should move on or reassess. You will silence things early that would scream at you later. So the real work is not figuring out if you're late. It's figuring out whether fear is driving your decisions, because fear makes you choose safety over depth. Nobody wants surface level love at the end of the day. It might work with you and your kids now while they're both under the age of 15, but when they're over 20, then what? Won't even make a difference to them. They'll be on their own life, and you'll be looking and seeing how much depth you do have or don't have. Compatibility you do or don't have. Is he funny? Can he hold a conversation? Can you stand looking at her in the morning? Fear makes you prioritize structure over connection. Fear makes you accept good enough instead of honesty. And here's something very real. Good enough can last for years, but if good enough costs you yourself, it will not feel good in the long run. So, now we are here. You understand rushing, you understand staying, you understand investment, you understand fear. Now what? Because the answer is not just leaving. Or do you leave? Or just leave? The answer is not just stay and be grateful. Stay because everybody will look at you if you leave. Stay because if you leave, maybe your friends will stop talking to you. You'll be off limits. The answer is slower than that. Midlife decisions are not about excitement, they are about sustainability. But sustainability is not the same thing as endurance. Endurance is tolerating. Sustainability is something you can live inside without slowly resenting it. And that's different. Now let's talk about how to actually evaluate without panic. First question. If I remove time pressure from this decision, how do I feel about this person? That's right. If you remove time pressure from this decision, how do you feel about the person? Take time out of it. You got all the time in the world. Do you pick this person? If there are no biological clocks, no peer comparison, you don't care what anybody else has or doesn't have, or what you don't have or what you do have. Comparisons in your group chats. Yeah, those comparisons too. No fear of starting over. No financial panic. Just you and them. Would you still choose this on a desert island? Not because they are safe, not because they are decent, not because they are stable or a good girl or a good man, but because you respect them. Because you trust how they handle you and how they handle conflict. Because you feel calm around them. Calm matters more than intensity. Intensity feels powerful in the beginning. Calm feels sustainable, long-term, satisfying. Next, when we disagree, what happens? Do we repair or do we withdraw? Do we listen or do we just defend? Do we escalate or do we stabilize? Talk about it. Conflict styles predict more than chemistry will ever. You can be wildly attracted to someone and completely incompatible in conflict. That compatibility does not disappear with time. It amplifies under stress. Next question. Am I shrinking to make this work? This one is important because maybe you've already lost yourself in other relationships in the past, or maybe you trimmed off here and there just to fit into something that was horrible. Are you holding back your opinions? Are you lowering your expectations? Are you convincing yourself you do not need certain things? Or are you accepting, emotional distance because you're afraid to demand closeness with this person? If you are consistently reducing yourself to maintain the peace, you're not building something solid. You are slowly just erasing your parts of yourself in the relationship. And that always shows up later. You're not gonna be able to always put on. One morning, you're just gonna come out whoever you are, and you're gonna grit against the other person because they're not used to that real you. Or maybe it'll happen in the other way. What do you got? What's in front of you? Are they real? Fourth question. Are you merging naturally or forcing integration? Later in life, you're merging systems like kids, schedules, money, health, ex-partners. You never know. You can't romanticize logistics. If your lives constantly grind against each other, that friction will not magically just smooth out. It'll accumulate. Now, here's something else that we need to say very carefully, of course. Complexity is normal in midlife. Surprise, surprise. We all got baggage. Everyone has a history, but how someone manages their history tells you everything. Do they speak about their ex with constant rage? Do they take responsibility for the stuff they did in their past? Are you able to forgive stuff that they've done in their past? Even if you weren't there and you believe you're deserving of having an opinion about it? Do they manage money with discipline? Do they co-parent with structure? Do they maintain boundaries with others? The presence of history is not the problem. The management of it is. Because there's lots of lessons in history, and many of us have learned many things. And some of us have learned the wrong things. Now let's talk about men and women without turning it into a debate. But you know that sometimes you can become the example of how not to be. And sometimes the ways that you are, and you know how you are, but they don't, might actually open the eyes of the new person to realize what they had before you was better, a lot better. Yeah. So many things to think about. Many women in midlife feel the weight of economic reality more heavily. Separation can hit financially hard, especially with children. That reality makes decisions heavier because some people refuse to help out when you divorce or when you separate, or when you just go your separate ways and you're not married. Many men in midlife feel the weight of loneliness differently. It's almost like we inherently know that we tend to move on to the upper room earlier, and we usually need help earlier. You see, after divorce, routines collapse, structure disappears. Identity is tied to partnership, collapses. And that creates urgency. Different pressure, same vulnerability. The feeling that some time is not unlimited anymore. Or time on a whole, it's just not unlimited. And that feeling can either sharpen your clarity or distort it totally. You're not wrong. Understand that. You're not wrong for wanting stability. You're not weak for fearing isolation. You're not foolish for wanting something that lasts. But if your primary driver is fear, you will overvalue security and undervalue depth. And depth is what makes long-term partnerships feel alive and well and worth it and satisfying. Security without depth feels safe at first, and then flat, then suffocating, and then dead. Depth without security feels exciting at first, then chaotic, then exhausting. But you need both. Now let's go back to the title. Did I miss my window? Maybe the better question is, what standards did I lower because I believed I did? Because The moment you believe you are late, you start bargaining with yourself. You start saying, I can live with this, instead of asking, is this truly good for me? And there's a difference between compromise and quiet self abandonment. Of course, you have to compromise. Compromise is mutual, self abandonment is one sided. And you feel it. You tend to feel it every day. You feel it when you lie awake next to someone and your body is tense. You feel it when your conversation feels surface level and you're never really getting into where you want to get into. You feel it when you imagine the next 10 years and there's heaviness instead of steadiness. That heaviness is information, not drama, straight up information. Now, here's the grounding truth: there is no universal window. There are life stages, there are biological realities, there are economic realities. But there is not one single moment where everything closes. What closes is tolerance for chaos. What changes is energy for rebuilding. What increases is the weight of decisions. But readiness is more important than timing. If you understand your patterns now better than you did 10 years ago, if you know your attachment triggers now better than you did before, if you know what drains you now, if you know what stabilizes you now, then you're not really behind. You are informed. And when you're informed, you make better decisions. And they tend to outlast rushed ones. So no, maybe you didn't miss your window. Maybe you just stopped accepting anything that fits through it. And that takes more courage. Courage. The cowardly lion. It takes more courage than rushing ever will. So let's just sit in that for a bit, guys. Because this is not theory. This is you in your car. You at night. You on your couch. You looking at someone across the table. You lying next to someone and wondering, did I miss my window? You don't even say it like that. It comes out differently. Maybe it sounds like, I'm tired, or I don't want to start over again, or I don't want to explain my life again. I don't want to tell what I did or what I didn't do, or where I haven't gone or what I haven't done. I don't want to rebuild again. I don't want to break my kids' rhythm. I don't want to lose more time. That's what it really sounds like. And then there's the uncomfortable honesty. Time does actually change things. Your energy at 45 is not your energy at 25. Your tolerance for chaos is not the same. Your body is not the same, for better or for worse. Your risk appetite is not the same. So no, this isn't a fantasy conversation where we pretend biology, economics, and aging don't exist. They do. But of course, we want everything to be, as they say, clear. We want clarity, right? Clarity that you don't, you didn't have at 25. Clarity about your attachment patterns and styles, your clarity about things that trigger you or drain you or stabilize you. Clarity about what you can actually live with and take. Clarity about what you can't. And clarity, of course, it's not weakness. It's earned with your time. And here's the danger when you think you're too late. You start bargaining with yourself. You start saying things like, it's not exactly what I wanted, but it's fine. He's fine. He's okay. He's cute. They're not perfect, but who is? John's husband, that's who. Her wife. Yeah. All hetero here, guys. Just straight up. It's calm enough. It's stable enough. It's good enough. Good enough is tricky though, because good enough can feel peaceful at first. Then over time, it starts to feel flat, and then flat starts to feel heavy, and heavy starts to feel like quiet regret. And regret in midlife is not dramatic, it's just subtle. You can feel it. It looks, the looks you give when you're looking in the mirror, looking at yourself, wondering, what did you get yourself into, or what did you take yourself out of? It's the way you avoid certain conversations. It's the way you scroll at night instead of talking. It's the way intimacy becomes routine instead of connection. It's the way you stop bringing up things that matter because you're tired of not being heard or arguing. And then one day you realize you built something stable, but you don't fully feel alive inside of it. And that's the cost of choosing primarily out of fear. Now let's flip it. What does it look like to choose from steadiness instead of panic? It looks slower, calmer, less dramatic, less exciting. It looks like asking uncomfortable questions early. It looks like talking about money honestly, talking about kids honestly, talking about sex honestly, talking about conflict honestly, talking about aging honestly. It looks like paying attention to when your body tightens instead of ignoring it. It looks like not explaining away a red flag just because you're tired. It looks like letting something go even when it hurts, because long-term misfits hurt more. Like a round object in a square hole. It looks like being willing to be alone for a reason rather than trapped for a decade. That's not romantic, that's discipline. Now, here's something that needs to land clearly. Being single at 45 is not failure. Being divorced at 55 is not failure. Being cautious at 35 is not failure. Staying somewhere that is slowly eroding you because you're afraid of time, that is where damage happens. And many times you can fix things. Sometimes you can go to the Word of God and figure out where we're dropping the ball on each other. Sometimes a little counseling if you really are invested. And here's the truth, really. You're not afraid of being single. You're born single. You're born alone and you'll die alone. You are afraid of being forgotten. You're not afraid of sleeping alone. You are afraid of dying without having been deeply chosen. And that's a real fear. And when that fear drives decisions, you will accept someone who chooses you quickly over someone who understands you deeply. And there's a difference. Quick choices, yeah, they can feel good. Deep understanding feels secure though. Quick choice calms anxiety, and the quick choice is because there's something in them or in the two of you together that you think makes sense to the world, more likely than not. Deep understanding builds trust. Quick choices stop the loneliness tonight. Deep understanding prevents loneliness 10 years from now. Let's come back to the title. Did I miss my window? Maybe the real question is this: what standards did I lower because I believed I did? What parts of myself did I silence? What concerns did I ignore? What patterns did I excuse? What discomfort did I just rationalize and normalize? Because the moment you believe you're late, you start negotiating with yourself, as I said before. And self-negotiation always costs you something. There is no universal window. There are reasons, there are responsibilities, there are consequences, there are biological realities. But there is not one single door that slams shut forever. What closes is fantasy. What changes is tolerance. What increases is awareness. And awareness is not lost its power, it's understanding. If you are clearer now than you were 10 years ago, you are not behind. If you recognize your fear when it shows up, you're not behind. If you are slower because you are wiser, that means you're not blind or behind. You are informed. And informed decisions feel calmer. They feel steadier. They feel less frantic. They do not come from relief. They come from knowing. Not, phew. No, it comes from knowing. Maybe you didn't miss your window. Maybe you just stopped crawling through openings that were shrinking you. Maybe you're not late. Maybe you're finally deliberate in what you're going to do. And deliberate lasts longer than panic ever will. All right, guys, that's it for today. Thanks for hanging out with me again. Please share the pod. Please follow. If you've been in here more than once, please. It just helps me out, that's all. I'm trying to expand this thing and go further with it. But if I just, trickle down effect of viewers and, anyhow, if you do see the value in my podcast and episodes, then please follow, like, and I guess sub wherever you can. Thanks a lot. Take care again. See ya. MCM out. Hey, come check out You Probably Right podcast. Society is getting more unpredictable every day, but at the same time, predictable in its unpredictability. Say that 4 times real fast. Come with me as I attempt to find clarity in all the fog while staying way outside the box and kicking the box way down the road with my size 12 ducks. I use the Bible, experience, education, fortune, misfortune, life's lessons, life's mistakes to sort through all the mess. I talk about news, God, God, self-help, sports, sickness, health, music, parenting, love, humbleness, hurt, pain, joy, and all the things that might make you say, I never thought of it that way. Hopefully, anyway. Also, I take a stab at answering tough and not so tough questions, and all the while understand that, listen, sometimes you end up in the hot seat and there's no thermostat. Well, that's how it is here. And because there's no topic, very few topics off the table, Torontonians will understand that Doug Ford reference there. Hopefully the podcast will be helpful and uplifting. And hey, maybe you'll find your own private Idaho here somewhere. Hope to see you soon. Ooh, yeah. Listen. It's getting
I'm still wide awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the space you take. One day you're here, next day you're gone, and I'm just trying to understand where we went wrong. You only love me in the middle of the night, then you fade away with the morning light. I need to know, is this for real? Tell me how you truly feel. Oh, yeah. I give my all, you give me half your heart. You say the words, but we just stay so far apart. These mixed signals are tearing me down, lost in the silence when you're not around. Tell me how you feel. How you really feel. Is any of this real? Just tell me, yeah. Tell me, baby. Oh. You only love me in the middle of the night. Then you fade away with the morning light. I need to know, is this for real? Tell me how you truly feel. Oh.